From the 52nd floor of the Valiant Tower, Alexis Monroe could see nearly all of downtown Dallas, the glass-walled skyline glinting like cut diamonds under the late afternoon sun. The streets below were busy with rush-hour traffic, but up here, silence reigned. Thick, soundproof glass kept the chaos of the city at bay, just as well. Alexis had grown used to distance. In her world, control came from staying above it all, literally and emotionally. Her office was more art gallery than workspace. Matte black floors, sweeping windows, a wall of framed patents, and a minimalist white sofa no one ever sat on. She stood barefoot on the cool marble floor, sipping a rare single malt from a crystal tumbler, watching the city go about its business. To the world, Alexis Monroe was a titan, self-made billionaire, founder of Valiant Labs, and the first woman to patent a synthetic cancer inhibitor with fewer side effects than anything on the market. Business journals hailed her as the Queen of Clean Biotech. Women's magazines called her the Ice Flame, cold in negotiations, warm in philanthropic causes, always poised, always polished. They didn't see the nights she sat alone in this same office, lights off, watching planes land in the distance and wondering what kind of bedtime story her children would want if they had a father who knew them. Behind her, Harper and Harrison played quietly on a plush area rug, cross-legged and absorbed in a science kit. The 6-year-old twins whispered conspiratorially as they tried to extract DNA from a strawberry using dish soap and toothpicks. Alexis smiled at the sight, a rare, soft curve to her lips. "Mom, is it true that your blood looks different under a microscope when you're angry?" Harper asked, brows furrowed beneath her dark curls. Alexis crossed the room and knelt beside her daughter. "Not exactly, sweetheart, but your body does change when you're upset. Hormones, heart rate, breathing. Like when you get the stiff voice," Harrison added, "the one you use in meetings." Alexis blinked. "You notice that?" Harrison shrugged. "You always smile with your mouth, but not your eyes." "Out of the mouths of babes." She tousled his sandy brown hair, so much like his father's, and stood. "That's why I have you two. You keep me honest." Just then, a chime echoed from her sleek glass desk, an incoming message. She walked over, tapped the screen, and read it. Subject: Monroe Caldwell Wedding Invitation. From marge.monroe@monroebiolabs.com. Details: join us in celebrating the marriage of Jacob Monroe and Lena Caldwell. Date: May 14th, 6 p.m. Location: Monroe Estate, Hudson Valley, New York. Alexis stared at the screen, heart still, breath held. May 14th. Of course, 6 years to the day. Her fingers tightened around the tumbler until the glass creaked. The message might as well have been wrapped in ribbon and dipped in spite. The same estate, the same garden, the same manicured lawns where she had once vowed to build a life beside the man who would later throw her into the night like a stranger. Jacob Monroe. The name still made something tighten behind her ribs. He hadn't just ended their marriage, he'd erased her. Frozen accounts. Canceled access. Let others believe she had cheated, then married the woman who'd helped orchestrate it all. She turned back toward the twins, now giggling over bubbles of strawberry goo. Jacob didn't even know they existed. He had demanded a paternity test and never followed through. She should delete the email, block the sender, carry on as if it didn't matter. Instead, she walked to her private bar, poured the rest of the scotch down the drain, and picked up her phone. "Renee," she said when her assistant answered. "Clear my schedule next weekend. Tell Michael to prep the jet. We'll be flying to New York." Renee hesitated. "That weekend? The gala? Cancel it. And the twins? Should I arrange childcare?" Alexis's voice dropped firm. "They're coming with me." She hung up and turned to her children, now looking up at her with strawberry-stained fingers and wide, expectant eyes. "We're going on a trip," she said, her voice calm, "to meet someone important." "Who?" Harrison asked. Alexis looked between them, Harper with her fierce stare, Harrison with his thoughtful frown, and felt the steel form inside her again. Your father. The twins didn't understand the weight of her words. Not yet, but they would. Because Alexis hadn't spent 6 years building an empire just to look impressive in boardrooms. She hadn't risen from betrayal and homelessness to become a mogul out of vanity. She had built it for them. And now it was time for the truth to land like a helicopter in the middle of someone else's perfect life. 6 years earlier, Hudson Valley, New York. The Monroe estate looked exactly like a magazine spread that had forgotten how to feel. Elegant, expansive, empty. Alexis stood in the marble foyer, barefoot in silk pajamas, watching Jacob pace the room like a man possessed. He clutched her phone in one hand, his jaw rigid, his knuckles white. She'd seen him furious before in meetings, in the lab, even during high-stakes investor negotiations, but never like this. Never with the kind of quiet, barely leashed rage that made her stomach knot. Who is he? Jacob asked, his voice low, dangerous. Alexis blinked. Who? He threw the phone at her feet. Don't play dumb, Alexis. Michael, the man you've been texting, the one who apparently knows every detail of our home, our bed. You were seeing him here while I was in Chicago, meeting with the FDA? I've never... Jacob, I don't even know who you're talking about. Let me see that. She reached down to pick up the phone, scrolling through messages she had never written. They looked authentic, her number, her style, but the words, explicit, intimate, cruel in their timing. Her hand shook. These aren't mine. This is fake. Someone cloned my number or hacked into... He stepped closer. You think I'm stupid? Number, I think you're scared, she said, grasping for something real between them. You've barely slept in weeks. You're under pressure. The board's breathing down your neck. And Julian found the messages. He hired a PI. They confirmed everything. Of course he did. Julian Caldwell, Jacob's lifelong friend turned CFO, and conveniently the brother of Lena Caldwell, the woman who'd been circling their marriage like a shark with pearls. Alexis shook her head, her pulse hammering. Jacob, please, look at me, really look. Do you think I could do this? That I would risk everything when we've been trying for a baby? He flinched, just for a second, and that second was all she had before the bedroom door opened. Julian stepped in like he owned the house. Smug, polished, holding a small black bag. Security found these in her car, he said, tossing the bag to Jacob. Inside, a man's Rolex, a hotel keycard, a printed receipt from a downtown boutique for silk lingerie Alexis had never seen. Her mouth went dry. I didn't... Get out, Jacob said. Alexis stared. What? He didn't look at her. Get out of this house. Jacob, you're not thinking clearly. Get out. His voice cracked like a whip, and it hit her square in the chest. She moved toward him, instinctively reaching out. Please, just talk to me. We can figure this out. He backed away as if her touch would burn him. I want the divorce papers drawn up tonight, he said quietly, as if rehearsing the words. Alexis turned to Julian. You planned this. His expression didn't waver. You're not the victim here, Alexis. She wanted to scream, to grab Jacob by the shoulders and shake the truth into him. But security was already in the hallway, waiting. She recognized 2 of them, men who had once smiled at her during charity galas and opened car doors with a nod. Now they looked through her. Within 20 minutes she was standing outside, a suitcase at her feet, her satin robe clinging to her like a joke. It had started to drizzle. Of course it had. She looked up toward the balcony where Jacob stood with Julian. Jacob's face was hard, unreadable. Julian placed a hand on his shoulder like a priest offering comfort. Her phone buzzed. Access to your email has been revoked. Building security has been alerted. Your accounts will be frozen effective immediately." She got in her car, numb, and drove. Not far, just to a drugstore with 24-hour parking. She sat under flickering lights, trying to breathe, trying to understand how she'd gone from love of his life to remove her now in the span of an evening. And then the nausea hit. Not the kind from betrayal, not this time. She'd had it for a few days. At first, she thought it was stress. Now, sitting in the sterile bathroom stall with the pregnancy test on the sink, she felt something shift inside her. 3 minutes later, 2 pink lines stared back at her. Twins, the doctor would tell her weeks later. A boy and a girl. She would name them Harper and Harrison. She would tell them stories about honor and truth, about loving fiercely even when it hurts, about the father who didn't know them. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But tonight, 6 years ago, she simply sat in that parking lot as the rain tapped gently on the windshield, alone, shaking, and pregnant. The first time Alexis Monroe heard her daughter say, "Daddy," it wasn't to a man. It was to a drawing. Harper had held up a sketch, a stick figure with dark hair and a lab coat, standing next to a smaller version of herself. "That's me and my dad," she'd said, proud and nonchalant, as if he were just down the hall. Alexis had smiled then, even as her chest tightened. "He looks very smart," she'd said. "Of course," Harper replied. "He's your husband." "Was," Alexis had almost said. That had been 2 years ago, back when the children still asked, sometimes, why they didn't have a father like the other kids. Back before she turned Valiant Labs into one of the most respected biotech firms in the country. Back when it still hurt to say Jacob's name out loud. But now they were ready. It was Saturday morning. Soft jazz played over the speakers in the penthouse, mingling with the clink of coffee cups and the occasional sound of Harrison's feet tapping against the floor as he built a Lego microscope on the kitchen table. Harper, wearing a sparkly headband and one of Alexis's oversized blazers as a makeshift lab coat, was taking patient notes in a composition notebook. They were, unintentionally and heartbreakingly, so much like the man who had no idea they existed. Alexis stood at the glass railing, coffee in hand, watching the city wake up beneath her. She'd barely slept since the wedding invitation arrived. 6 years of silence, and now he was marrying Lena Caldwell on the exact day he'd exiled her from his life. The cruelty of it felt deliberate. Or maybe it wasn't cruelty at all. Maybe he'd truly forgotten. Either way, she couldn't let the day pass. "Mom," Harrison said from the table, "are you nervous about the trip?" Alexis turned. "What makes you ask that?" "You didn't sleep much," Harper said, not even looking up, "and you wore heels to make coffee." Alexis glanced down. 4-inch Louboutins, not ideal for breakfast. "You two are way too observant." "We're scientists," Harper said with a shrug. "I'm the engineer," Harrison added. Alexis sat across from them and took a breath. "I want to talk to you both about something important." They straightened, sensing the shift in tone. "We're going on a trip to New York next week, to meet someone." Harper raised a brow. "Business?" Number Family Harrison tilted his head, thinking. "Grandma Eleanor?" "No." Alexis met their eyes. "Your father." The room was quiet except for the low hum of the espresso machine. "Our dad?" Harper asked finally. "Like, our real dad?" "Yes." Harper looked almost smug, like she'd suspected this moment would come. Harrison looked like he'd been hit with a math problem he wasn't sure how to solve. Alexis reached out and took their hands. "I didn't tell him about you. He doesn't know. But he's getting married. Soon. And it's time he met you both. Not because I want anything from him, but because you deserve to know where you come from. Will he want us?" Harrison's voice was quiet. Alexis's throat tightened. She'd spent years preparing for this conversation, practicing answers, rehearsing strength, but nothing could have prepared her for that question. "I don't know," she said honestly. "But I promise you this. I want you. Every day, always. And no matter what happens next, we're a team." Harper nodded slowly. "Okay. But can I wear the blazer when we go?" Alexis laughed. "You can wear a crown if you want." Just then, Renee buzzed through. "Sorry to interrupt, Alexis. Michael's downstairs." Alexis stood, smoothing her silk blouse. "Send him up." The elevator chimed a few minutes later, and Michael Baptiste stepped into the penthouse carrying a tray of croissants and his usual quiet warmth. Tall, kind-eyed, and a pediatric surgeon with a disarming smile, he'd become a regular part of their lives over the last year. At first, through Eleanor, then through the children, especially Harrison, who'd once insisted on interviewing him about why surgeries are basically glorified puzzles. "Breakfast delivery," Michael said, setting the tray down and giving Alexis a nod that hovered between affection and respect. "Thought you might need a carb-based pep talk." Harper and Harrison both raced to hug him. "We're going to meet our dad," Harper announced through a mouthful of chocolate croissant. Michael blinked. "Wow, that's big news." Alexis met his eyes. There was no jealousy there, no resentment, just understanding. That had always been his strength, never pushing, never judging, just present. "I wanted to tell him years ago," she said softly, "but I wasn't ready. Maybe I was afraid, of being dismissed, of them being rejected." Michael nodded. "But you're ready now?" "I think so." He glanced at the twins, then back at her. "Then you've already won." Alexis walked him to the door as the twins debated what kind of dad Jacob might be. Michael turned before he left. "Whatever happens, I'm here, for you, for them." "I know," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you." He left with that same unshakable calm he always carried. And Alexis stood at the door for a long moment after it closed. She wasn't sure what Jacob would say when he saw them, or what kind of storm the confrontation might bring. But she knew one thing for certain. They were ready now. The chime of the helicopter blades echoed off the stone walls of the Monroe estate like a coming storm. Lena Caldwell adjusted her veil for the third time in 5 minutes, her manicured fingers trembling ever so slightly. Outside the French doors, the guests were already seated beneath a canopy of white roses. A string quartet played an elegant rendition of Clair de Lune, and champagne flutes sparkled on linen-covered tables. Everything was perfect, almost oppressively so. "Breathe," Julian Caldwell murmured beside her, his tone cool and composed. "He's just nervous, that's all." But Lena wasn't so sure. She'd seen the look in Jacob's eyes all morning. Distant, distracted, not like a man about to marry the woman he loved. He'd smiled when he had to, made the right small talk, but something about him felt hollow. Still, this was the finish line, the culmination of 6 years of calculated effort. A marriage that would merge 2 legacies, 2 fortunes, and secure their place atop the biotech world. It was hers. All of it. Finally. And then the sound came. Low at first, then rising, whump, 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 until conversation outside turned into murmurs, chairs scraping, necks craning toward the sky. Jacob was already at the altar when he heard it. He turned slowly, brow furrowed, the distant thudding pulling him from his carefully rehearsed detachment. His heart thudded once, hard. No one had mentioned a helicopter. Not today. Outside, guests stood from their white folding chairs as the sleek black aircraft descended onto the estate's private helipad. The petals scattered across the aisle fluttered in the wind, a blizzard of white against green. And then the door opened. The first to emerge was a woman in a navy suit, tailored to perfection, her dark hair pulled back in a clean, elegant twist. She stepped out with the poise of someone who belonged in boardrooms and war rooms, not weddings. Jacob felt the air leave his lungs. Alexis. Time didn't stop. It snapped. Memory collided with reality in a brutal wave. The woman he'd exiled, the one he'd trusted most and believed had betrayed him, the woman he hadn't seen in 6 years. But she wasn't alone. 2 children stepped out behind her, small, polished, and composed, a boy and a girl, each holding one of her hands. The girl's curls were tied in a velvet ribbon. The boy wore a tiny navy blazer. They moved together like they'd rehearsed it. Jacob blinked, stunned. His legs nearly gave beneath him. They had his eyes. The guests whispered, heads turning, confusion spreading like wildfire. Julian pushed through the tent flaps, white-faced. "What the hell is she doing here?" he hissed. Lena appeared a beat later, her veil flapping behind her, confusion turning to dread. "Is this some kind of stunt?" Jacob couldn't speak. His gaze was locked on the children. The boy's steady gaze, the girl's confident posture, a mirror of him, a mirror of them. Alexis stepped onto the path and walked toward the altar like it was a courtroom. Calm, centered. Not a hint of rage or bitterness in her face, only truth. When she reached the edge of the gathering, she stopped and looked directly at Jacob. "Meet your children," she said, her voice clear and measured. "Harper and Harrison. They're 6. You threw me out before I could tell you I was pregnant." A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Jacob stumbled forward a step. "Alexis, I never got any message." "You did," she said, soft and sharp. "Your security delivered it, but Julian intercepted it, just like he intercepted my calls, blocked my emails, and had me blacklisted from every research facility on the East Coast." Julian paled. "That's a lie." Alexis turned slowly, reaching into her leather folder. "I have the records, the forged paternity test denial, the payments to the PI, the lab data that was altered under your signature after I left." Jacob turned to Julian, his jaw clenched. "Is that true?" "Of course not," Julian snapped, but there was a tremor in his voice now. Alexis faced the crowd. "Your groom is standing at the altar while your company is under federal investigation. And your bride-to-be?" She turned to Lena. "She's been funneling trial data through offshore accounts under her brother's supervision." Lena gasped. "You have no proof." "I do. And the SEC has it now, too." From the back, 2 men in dark suits approached, badges raised. "Julian Caldwell, Lena Caldwell, you'll need to come with us." Panic broke through Lena's perfect expression. "Jacob, do something!" But Jacob didn't move. He just stared at Alexis, and at the children, at the life he never knew he'd lost. The wedding was over, or maybe it had never truly begun. The garden chairs sat half-emptied, some tipped over, white rose petals trampled under expensive shoes as guests slowly scattered like a stunned flock. A few lingered in knots near the estate's hedges, whispering urgently, craning for one more glimpse of the scene they'd never forget. Alexis stood near the edge of the aisle, hands at her sides, her expression unreadable. The children stayed close, Harper clutching her mother's hand, Harrison watching Jacob with narrowed, assessing eyes. Jacob Monroe hadn't moved. Not since the FBI escorted Lena and Julian out through the arch of roses meant for wedding vows. He was still standing in front of the altar, frozen in a tailored tuxedo, staring at the lives he had somehow missed. He looked older now, leaner, more exhausted than Alexis remembered. The confident edge he used to carry like a second skin was gone, replaced with something brittle and disoriented. A man watching the scaffolding of his life collapse and realizing he was the one who signed the permits. "Alexis," he said finally. The name came out on a breath, like it tasted strange in his mouth. She didn't flinch. "I didn't know." "You didn't want to," she replied, her voice low but steady. "I told your security I was pregnant. I sent the message. You chose not to see me. You chose Julian." Jacob stepped forward, shaking his head slowly, eyes on the twins. "They're mine?" Alexis met his gaze. "Every inch of them." He looked at Harper, who raised her chin in a way that reminded him, startlingly, of Alexis during a boardroom showdown. Then Harrison, whose quiet presence pulsed with a focused stillness Jacob recognized all too well. "They're incredible," he whispered. Harper tilted her head. "We know." Alexis gently touched her daughter's back. "Why don't you and your brother wait by the car, sweetheart? I won't be long." The twins exchanged a look but obeyed. Alexis watched them go, her hand unconsciously lingering near her heart. When she turned back to Jacob, the warmth drained from her face. "You destroyed me," she said, voice calm and cutting. "You didn't just believe a lie. You helped build it, froze my accounts, revoked my access to the lab I helped design. Let people whisper I was unstable." "I didn't know," he said again, helplessly. "You didn't ask." That silenced him. She stepped closer, her eyes sharp as glass. "While you were planning your next board presentation with Lena, I was vomiting in a Walmart parking lot, sleeping in my car. I was 28, pregnant, and erased from my own life overnight." Jacob's face crumpled. "I didn't. God, Alexis. I was grieving. I had just lost my brother. Julian said—" "No," she interrupted, voice like a snap of frost. "Don't feed me excuses. You didn't lose your brother. You lost your spine." That landed. He exhaled, shaking. "I've thought of this moment 1,000 times," she said, her voice quieter now. "How I'd make you suffer. How I'd show up at your wedding and ruin it like you ruined everything for me. But I'm not here for revenge." "Then why?" She paused, looking over her shoulder at the car where her children waited. "Because they deserve to know where they came from. Not a fantasy. Not a villain. Truth. I want them to have the choice I was never given, whether to know their father." Jacob looked shattered. "Will you let me try?" Alexis studied him carefully. "Try? To know them, to make this right, somehow." 6 years, she said. "You don't get to make that up with a Sunday picnic." "I know." "I don't trust you," she added, eyes unwavering. "Not yet. Maybe not ever." Jacob nodded, absorbing the blow. "But I'll show up, even if it's just to drop off school supplies. Even if all I get is to sit in the back row of their school play. I'll take whatever you're willing to give." For a moment, Alexis simply looked at him, and for the first time in years, she allowed herself to wonder what it would have been like if he'd said that then. She took a breath, steadied her voice. "You'll get my terms, legal ones. We'll start with visitation. Limited, supervised." "I understand." She turned to leave, but stopped short, her back still to him. "You were the first man I ever trusted with everything," she said quietly. "And you let someone else decide I wasn't worth hearing out." When she finally walked away, the heels of her boots crushed the petals beneath her like fallen promises. In the car, the twins looked up as she opened the door. "Are we going home?" Harper asked. Alexis fastened her seatbelt, hands still trembling. "Not yet. We have one more stop." "Where?" Harrison asked. She looked straight ahead, her tone unreadable. "To show your father what it means to earn a second chance." Alexis rarely let herself look back. But that night, after the wedding, that wasn't. After the cameras had gone and the headlines began to swirl, she found herself standing in her children's room at the penthouse, fingers trailing along the edges of framed drawings and toy bins, breathing in their quiet. They were asleep. Finally. Harper curled on her side like she always did, one hand tucked beneath her cheek. Harrison sprawled, one foot dangling off the bed, his little glasses set neatly on the nightstand beside a worn copy of The Way Things Work. Alexis lingered in the doorway longer than usual, the weight of the day still coiled tight around her chest. Jacob had seen them, and somehow, against every instinct screaming otherwise, she'd given him a thread to hold on to. She turned off the hall light and padded barefoot to the kitchen, needing stillness, or maybe just the illusion of control. The refrigerator's soft hum filled the quiet. She poured herself a glass of water and leaned against the counter, staring at nothing. 6 years ago, she'd stood in a kitchen much like this, in a home that wasn't hers anymore, being told she was a liar, a whore, a stain on the legacy Jacob had inherited. Back then, she hadn't even cried. Not until the hotel bathroom in a roadside inn, a day later, when she realized her wedding ring wouldn't cover a week of groceries, much less prenatal vitamins. That was when she met Ms. B. Torres. She was a retired nurse, tough as nails, and twice as sharp. Alexis had nearly passed out in the aisle of the grocery store, nauseous and dizzy, and B had caught her elbow before she hit the tile. Took her home, handed her ginger tea, and said, "You don't look like someone who gives up." B became a lifeline. And when Alexis refused to crumble, when she traded her wedding ring for an old laptop and started rewriting grant proposals on her kitchen floor, B was the one who stood behind her and said, "Keep going." It was also B who introduced her to Dr. Noelle Baptiste, an ex-industry firebrand, the kind of woman who made entire boards sweat. Noelle had once led a major pharmaceutical company until she blew the whistle on their buried clinical trial results. After that, no one would hire her either. The two women had built Valiant Labs from a converted garage and a mutual refusal to be erased. Alexis owed them more than gratitude. She owed them her resurrection. Her phone buzzed on the counter. Michael Baptiste just checking in. "How are you holding up?" Alexis hesitated. Michael. Calm, steady, present. He was Dr. Baptiste's son, a pediatric surgeon with a soft voice and eyes that understood grief. He'd never once asked her for more than she could give. And in that, he had become something dangerous. Safe. Still standing, she replied. A moment later, the dots blinked. Sometimes that's the bravest thing. "The kids okay?" "Sleeping." Harper made a top 10 things we noticed about Dad list. Number 3 was, he blinks too much when he's nervous. Smart kid. Alexis smiled, a tired, genuine thing. "I'll be by tomorrow." "Want me to bring B?" "She's been threatening to bake." "Please do. And tell her not to bring that spice cake. Harrison says it tastes like regret." Michael responded with a laughing emoji and a, "Got it, cinnamon-free zone." Alexis set the phone down and stared at her reflection in the glass. She barely recognized herself anymore. Not the betrayed wife. Not the girl who once believed love meant safety. Not even the CEO. Somewhere between the ashes of her marriage and the rise of Valiant, she had become something else. Sharper, stronger, but harder too. And she wasn't sure if there was still room in that woman for softness, for possibility, for someone like Michael. There was a knock at the door. She turned, startled. It was nearly 10 p.m. Another knock, more insistent. She crossed the floor, cautious, heart climbing. Opened the door, and there he was. Jacob, no suit, no entourage. Just jeans and a sweatshirt, his hair a little wild, eyes rimmed red. He looked like he hadn't slept since the garden confrontation. "I'm sorry," he said. She didn't move. "You said that already." "I needed to say it again." Her arms crossed. "You should have called. I didn't think you'd answer. You thought right." He exhaled. "I know I don't deserve to be here, and I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking for understanding, or at least a place to start." "You're not coming in," she said coolly. "I'm not asking to." He reached into his coat and pulled out a small, weathered envelope. "This is yours." She frowned. "What is it?" "Something I should have read 6 years ago. It was in the bottom of my desk drawer. Julian must have buried it there." He handed it to her. It was the letter. The one she had sent, begging for a chance to explain. Letting him know she was pregnant. That she still loved him. Her breath hitched. "I'm sorry I didn't see it," Jacob said softly. "And I'm sorry I didn't look harder." She held the letter against her chest, suddenly unsure of the ground beneath her. Jacob stepped back. "Good night, Alexis." She watched him walk to the elevator. This time she didn't stop him. Not because he didn't deserve to go, but because, for the first time, she wasn't sure if she wanted him to stay. The scent of cinnamon scones filled the penthouse like a warm memory the next morning, despite Alexis's warnings to Bea the night before. "You think that boy of yours knows what regret tastes like?" Bea muttered, pulling the tray from the oven. "Tell him I've tasted his school lunch carrots. He can't talk." Alexis smiled faintly as she poured a second cup of coffee and handed it to Dr. Noel Baptiste, who sat at the kitchen island, scrolling through headlines on her tablet. "Front page of the Journal," Noel said, tapping the screen. "Wedding crash, federal investigation, Monroe's stock halved overnight." Alexis leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "They'll spin it. Blame Lena and Julian. Maybe even try to make Jacob the savior who cleaned house." Bea grunted from the stove. "Let 'em try. Public loves a man who didn't know, even when the man was willfully blind." Noel arched a brow. "You don't believe he knew?" "I believe," Bea said, wiping her hands on a dish towel, "that he didn't want to know. Makes the guilt easier to live with." Alexis said nothing. She'd been turning it over in her head all night, the envelope, the letter, the hollow look in Jacob's eyes when he handed it to her. She'd watched him walk away and felt nothing clean, not hatred, not forgiveness, just ache, like her body didn't know what to do with all the pieces still floating around. "Did you read it?" Noel asked gently. Alexis nodded. "After he left." "And?" "It was the letter I wrote," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "He never saw it. I believe him." Bea set the scones down with a sigh. "Believing him isn't the same as trusting him." "I know," Alexis replied. "And I don't." There was a knock at the door before either woman could respond. Alexis didn't move. "It's probably Michael." Bea opened it, and sure enough there he stood, casual in jeans, a button down, and that ever-present ease that felt like breath after fire. "Morning," he said, stepping in with a bag from the bakery downtown. "Brought non-regret pastries just in case." Bea grinned. "You're learning." He kissed her cheek and then turned to Alexis, offering her a smile that didn't push. "How are the twins?" he asked. "Still asleep. They're processing in their own way." Michael nodded. "Anything I can do?" Alexis glanced toward the tray of pastries. "You already did it." As the morning unfolded, they all sat around the kitchen table like a mismatched family. Two powerful women, a retired nurse with no filter, and a man who never once looked at Alexis like she was damaged goods. It wasn't until later, after Michael took the twins to the Science Museum, that Noel and Alexis sat alone in the study, papers and legal documents spread out between them. "You sure about the merger proposal?" Noel asked. "Monroe Biolabs is bleeding," Alexis said. "The board will be forced to negotiate within the month. We'll offer terms that protect our values and expand our reach." Noel sipped her coffee. "You could let them fail. Watch it burn." "I could," Alexis agreed. "But that's not what I built Valiant for." There was a pause. "And Jacob?" Alexis closed her eyes for a moment. "I want the kids to know him." I'm not trying to erase him from their lives. But you're also not giving him a path back to yours. Alexis met her mentor's gaze. He has to earn that. And honestly, I don't know if I even want him to. Noelle nodded, satisfied. Just then, Bea poked her head in. You've got company again. Alexis looked up. Michael forget something? Bea shook her head. Not him, the other one. Her stomach dipped. Jacob stood at the door of the study a moment later, holding a brown envelope. I know I'm probably the last person you want to see today, he said, stepping inside, but I need 10 minutes. Noelle rose, nodded politely, and left the room. Bea, however, lingered at the door for a beat, giving Alexis a look that said, I'm 2 rooms away if he tries anything stupid. What is it? Alexis asked. Jacob placed the envelope on the table. It's from Monroe's legal team. I had them dig into everything Julian touched the year you were forced out. Internal memos, emails, off-books contracts. You're 6 years late. I know, but I want you to see that I'm doing the work. She didn't touch the envelope. He hesitated. The kids, Harper and Harrison. I know I don't deserve to just step in, but I'd like to start showing up. Soccer games, piano recitals, science fairs, even if I sit in the back row. Alexis considered him for a long time. You don't get to write your redemption arc in 1 week, Jacob. I'm not trying to, he said quietly. I just don't want to disappear again. Something about his voice, raw, unscripted, made her throat tighten. Then start small, she said. Pick them up next Friday, after school, 1 hour. I'll have someone with you. He nodded, the barest smile tugging at his lips. Thank you, he said. But Alexis didn't smile back. She waited until he left, then opened the envelope. And what she saw inside made her fingers go cold. Emails, signed agreements, deleted video logs of security footage, of her. And a corporate trail that didn't just exonerate her. It implicated Lena and Julian in a scheme bigger than a divorce. Something that could take down everything Jacob still had left. She sat back slowly, heart pounding. This wasn't just about truth anymore. This was war. The boardroom at Valiant Labs felt colder than usual, though the thermostat hadn't changed. Alexis sat at the head of the glass conference table, flanked by Dr. Noel Baptiste and Valiant's general counsel, Mara Singh. The walls were lined with screens displaying stock tickers, regulatory updates, and, most glaringly, a headline from the New York Herald. Monroe Biolabs under fire, leaked docs, point to data suppression and financial misconduct. Alexis didn't look at the screen. She already knew what it said. She'd read every word of the leaked report, every footnote, every timestamp. Most of it had come from the envelope Jacob handed her. What he didn't know was that she'd spent the last 24 hours corroborating it, with help. Bea had called in a favor from an old friend at the Department of Health and Human Services, and Alexis had called her own bluff. Monroe's exposure goes beyond Julian and Lena, Mara said, flipping through pages. There's indication that 3 board members were aware of the data irregularities and signed off on suppressing early trial results for the AX-17 compound. Alexis nodded. Then it's not just a moral failure, it's a legal one. Noelle leaned forward. Are we pulling the trigger? That was the question. She could move now. Issue a formal statement, press criminal charges, publicly announce Valiant's acquisition intentions, and let Monroe Biolabs collapse under the weight of its own lies. Or she could hold, negotiate behind the scenes, limit the fallout, avoid turning the public spectacle into a bloodbath. Either way, she'd win. But one path scorched the earth, and the other. What about Jacob? Noelle asked quietly, reading her. Alexis didn't respond right away. He'd texted that morning. Thank you for letting me see them Friday. I won't mess this up. It had been short, hesitant, real. She wanted to hate how much she still felt when she read his words. But hate was clean, and what she felt for Jacob was anything but. "He's either complicit or collateral," Mara said. "You know that, right?" "I know." But Alexis couldn't shake the memory of Jacob at the door, holding that envelope like it was penance, or the way Harper had watched him with cautious interest, not distrust. She thought of Harrison, later that night, quietly asking, "Do you think he'll stay this time?" Her heart had cracked a little then. "I'm going to give him a choice," she said. Mara raised an eyebrow. "You're negotiating?" "I'm offering him a moment to step into the light or disappear forever." Noelle nodded once. "You're your father's daughter, you know." Alexis looked up. He used to say, "Justice without mercy is revenge, and mercy without justice is permission. You always knew how to walk that line." Alexis exhaled. "Let's hope I still do." That afternoon she waited for Jacob in a private room at the Park Hyatt, the same place they'd once celebrated their 3rd wedding anniversary, back when he still looked at her like she was gravity itself. He walked in, tentative but not fragile. He wore the kind of suit that whispered power but looked like it hadn't slept in days. "You got my message?" she asked, skipping pleasantries. "I did." He sat across from her. "Your lawyer hinted that something was coming." Alexis slid a file across the table. "It's already here." He opened it, jaw tightening with each page he turned. "This is worse than what you showed me before," he said. "I know." He looked up. "You could destroy us with this." "I could," she agreed. "Or I could offer you a choice." Jacob swallowed hard. "Go on." "I propose a clean merger. Valiant acquires Monroe Biolabs. You remain as a transitional advisor only. No board seat, no executive power. We clean house, keep the science, rebuild the trust." He stared at her. "Why would you do that?" "Because the people behind the lies are gone or going. But there are hundreds of employees who had no idea what Lena and Julian were doing. Thousands of patients depending on trials Monroe started. Science that deserves a future." He looked down. "You could take it all." "I don't want the ashes," she said. "I want the opportunity to do this right." He nodded slowly. "And what do you want from me?" "I want you to stand beside me when I announce it," she said. "Not as a partner, not as redemption, but as the man who finally decided to do the right thing." Jacob leaned back. "You still believe I can?" "I believe my children deserve a father who tries." The silence that followed stretched long and taut. Finally he whispered, "I was a coward." She didn't soften. "I know." He looked at her then, really looked. The woman he had married was still there, but burnished, stronger, impossible to break. "I'll do it," he said. "Whatever you need." Alexis nodded once. "Then meet me on Monday. You'll have the script. Stick to it." He stood, but didn't leave. "Alexis?" She met his gaze. "I don't expect forgiveness, but thank you for not burying me." Her voice was steady. "I didn't do it for you." And yet as he left, something in her chest shifted. Not forgiveness, not yet, but maybe the space for it. Monday morning came with a sharp wind off the Hudson and headlines that hadn't stopped printing Alexis Monroe's name. "Biotech queen to take over Monroe Labs" was splashed across the Wall Street Review. Valiant's victory trended across every financial site. The public had questions, but Alexis had answers and power. She arrived at the press conference in a steel gray sheath dress, no jewelry save for a slim silver bracelet Harper had made her. In her presence, the room hushed. Jacob was already there, pacing behind the curtain. She hadn't spoken to him since the hotel. He looked up when she entered, and for a moment neither of them said a word. The air between them was dense with memory of what they were, what they lost, and the fragile thread they now held between them. "You're early," she said. He gave a dry smile. "Didn't sleep much." She nodded. "Neither did I. I saw the final script," he added, his voice low. "It's generous." "It's true," she said. "That's different." He shifted. "Are the kids watching?" "Yes, Ms. B is with them." Jacob nodded and looked down at his hands. "They said I could stay after. For an hour?" "You can," she said. "Just don't make promises you can't keep." There was no malice in her voice, just fact, and somehow that cut deeper. They stepped out together as the cameras flashed, flanked by Noelle and Mara, and 2 members of the Monroe board who had scrambled to join the side of survival. Alexis took the lead, her voice crisp, clear, commanding. She outlined the terms of the merger, the shared vision for patient-first research, and a swift restructuring of Monroe Biolab's executive tier. Jacob followed, his tone measured and remorseful. "In retrospect," he said into the mic, "trust is the currency we spend most carelessly. I stand here today not only to support this merger, but to say, to the public, to our team, and especially to those I hurt, thank you for the chance to begin again." When the applause came, it was tentative but respectful. Backstage, Jacob exhaled like he'd been holding that breath for years. "You did well," Alexis said, surprised to realize she meant it. "I still feel like I don't deserve it," he said. "You don't." "Not yet." He nodded. "But I want to." Before she could respond, her phone buzzed. A message from B. "Harper said Dad looks taller on TV. Harrison says he talks better when he's nervous. Thought you'd like to know." Alexis smiled, despite herself. Then another message. This one from Mara. Just flagged something in Lena's off-site records. Internal comms between Julian and a private partner linked to one of Monroe's first investors. Name might be familiar. Check your email. Alexis excused herself and stepped into a quiet alcove. She opened the file Mara had forwarded, her pulse quickening with each line she read. A name, a set of emails, not Julian's, not Lena's, her father's. Backdated messages, before he died, before Monroe had gone public, linking him to the early suppression of trial data. Trial data Alexis had assumed Julian buried. But it hadn't started with Julian. It had started with the man who raised her, the man who taught her to fight for truth. She leaned against the wall, breathing hard. Jacob appeared at the doorway, concern knitting his brow. "Everything okay?" She looked up, eyes sharp with something new, grief laced with fury. "I need to go." "What happened?" "I just learned I've been protecting a lie even longer than I thought." He stepped forward. "Alexis, talk to me." But she shook her head. "Not now." She pushed past him and out into the wind, her heels clicking sharply on the tile. For the first time in years, she didn't know what she was walking toward, only what she was walking away from. That night the penthouse was quiet. Too quiet. The twins were asleep. Ms. B had left soup on the stove, but Alexis hadn't touched it. She sat on the balcony, wrapped in a wool shawl, staring at the city like it owed her something. The past had always been behind her. She'd told herself that for years. But tonight, it came crawling through her veins, her father's legacy, Jacob's betrayal, Lena's lies, Julian's greed, and hers. Because she'd built Valiant not just out of brilliance or necessity, but anger. Cold, careful fury. And maybe, just maybe, a need to prove to a dead man that she was better than him. Michael arrived quietly, letting himself in with the key B insisted he take last year. He brought no flowers, no fanfare, just warmth. "I saw the press conference," he said, stepping onto the balcony. Alexis nodded, eyes on the skyline. It looked cleaner than it felt. He studied her a long moment. "What happened?" She told him. About her father, about the emails, about how even the man who taught her to fight clean had buried bodies in the name of business. When she finished, she expected judgment or disappointment. Instead, Michael reached out and touched her hand. "Truth doesn't make us smaller," he said. "It makes us more human, and maybe a little braver." Alexis blinked against the sting in her eyes. "I don't know what to do with it," she whispered. "You sit with it," he said, "and then you do what you've always done. Move forward." She looked at him then, really looked. The warmth, the steadiness, the gentleness she never let herself need. "You always show up," she murmured. "I always will." He didn't kiss her, but the promise hung in the air between them. And for the first time since everything began, Alexis didn't feel like she was holding the whole world alone. Jacob stood in the middle of his apartment, surrounded by unopened boxes and untouched art still leaning against the walls. The condo was new, sleek, modern, all clean lines and cool grays. But it didn't feel lived in. It felt like a holding space. Like him. He ran a hand through his hair and stared at the email glowing on his laptop screen. Subject: Confirmation of corporate transfer. Monroe Biolabs to Valiant Labs Holdings. It was official. The company his family had spent 3 generations building was no longer theirs. It now belonged to Alexis. And for the first time, he didn't resent it. Because she had done what he never could. She protected it. She earned it. He closed the laptop and looked out at the city, at the skyline he'd once ruled from a glass tower with a corner office and a name on every patent. Now his name came with an asterisk. Former CEO transition consultant. Father of twins he barely knew. The fallout had been swift. Lena and Julian were facing indictments. Monroe's board was now Valiant's board, and Jacob had become the symbol of a man who let it all happen on his watch. Deserved or not, the weight of it sat heavy on his chest. He checked the time. He was supposed to pick up Harper and Harrison in an hour, his first solo visit. Alexis had sent a short but gracious message that morning. "They're excited. Just keep it light. And make them feel safe." Safe. God, how many ways had he failed at that? The knock came just as he was reaching for his coat. He opened the door, surprised to see his mother standing there, Marge Monroe, regal even in her 70s, her pearl earrings and tailored blazer as precise as ever. "I wasn't expecting you," Jacob said, stepping aside. "I wasn't planning to come," she replied, "but then I saw the press conference. And I saw her." Alexis. His mother walked into the living room and sat without being invited, surveying the chaos of half-unpacked belongings. "I remember when you two first brought the Monroe Labs proposal to the board," she said. "She had fire. You had vision. Everyone said you were unstoppable." Jacob sat across from her, wary. "And then I stopped us." Marge gave him a sharp look. "You trusted the wrong people. That's not the same as being the wrong person. But the world doesn't care about that kind of nuance." "I cared," he said quietly. "Then show it," she replied. "Show it to those children. Show it to her." Jacob leaned back, tired. "She doesn't want me." "She wants a man who will fight for more than his image," Marge said. "Can you be that man?" He didn't answer. She rose, smoothed her skirt, and headed to the door. "We all fail, Jacob. Some of us are just lucky enough to get a chance to fix it." When she left, Jacob stood there a long moment. Then he grabbed his keys. At the children's school, the pickup lane buzzed with the usual chaos. Cars double-parked, parents on cell phones, crossing guards with traffic whistles and nerves of steel. Jacob stood on the sidewalk in a navy sweater and jeans, holding a tote bag with snacks, a science kit, and a handwritten note he'd rewritten 5 times. "If this goes well," he thought, "I'll tell them more next week." Harper spotted him first. She didn't run. She walked, head high. Like her mother. "Hi," she said, cool but curious. "Hi," he replied, crouching to her level. "I was told you like lists, so I brought you a list of things we could do today. You get to pick." Harrison joined them, eyeing the bag. "Is that kinetic sand?" "It is." "Okay," he said. "You're on probation, but we're open to being impressed." Jacob laughed softly. "Fair." They walked together toward the park across the street, and for the first time the silence between them felt less like punishment and more like possibility. That night, Alexis sat on her balcony again, watching the lights of the city flicker on one by one. She hadn't asked how the visit went. She knew Jacob would tell her eventually, if only to prove he didn't disappear. The real question wasn't whether he could be a father, it was whether he could be a man worth knowing again. Inside, her phone vibrated. A photo. Jacob had sent it. Harper and Harrison were sitting on a picnic blanket, laughing over a collapsing tower of kinetic sand. Harper was holding up a scorecard, 8 out of 10, and Harrison had drawn a star. Alexis smiled. Then another message came in, this time from Michael. "You free for dinner tomorrow? I'll cook. No politics, no biotech, just pasta and people." She looked at the 2 messages. 2 men, 2 lives, 2 roads. One was a second chance at the past. The other, maybe a new future. She didn't respond to either, not yet. But the weight in her chest felt just a little lighter. The pasta was perfect. Michael had made it from scratch, fettuccine tossed in lemon cream with grilled vegetables and garlic bread so good Alexis had nearly groaned aloud. They sat across from each other in his apartment, a warm, modern space filled with books, plants, and that persistent scent of rosemary and something safe. He poured her another glass of wine. "I didn't realize how badly I needed this," she said, leaning back, her shoes already kicked off. "Dinner or company?" he teased. She smiled. "Yes." Michael watched her a moment, then reached for a folded linen napkin and passed it to her. "You've got sauce on your cheek." She took it, but didn't look away. There was a softness in the room that didn't ask questions, didn't chase answers, just existed, and that was rare in her world, in their world. Michael had seen her angry, defensive, triumphant, but never quite like this. Never quiet. He took a sip of wine. "So, are you going to tell me what's really on your mind?" She hesitated. "You always know when something's wrong." "I'm a surgeon," he said. "Reading people is part of the job." Alexis toyed with the stem of her glass. "I found out something about my father. Something I haven't told anyone, not even Noelle." Michael didn't rush her, just waited. She met his eyes. He helped suppress early data on Monroe's first immunotherapy drug, the one I based my post-grad thesis on, the one that inspired me to go into the field. Michael blinked, then exhaled slowly. "You're sure?" "I saw the emails. He used a proxy to work with Julian's father. They buried the failure rates. My father was the reason Monroe survived that quarter, and the reason a lot of patients didn't." He let that sink in. "I spent years thinking I was fighting against men like that," she said, her voice tight. "Turns out I was born from them." Michael set down his glass. "That doesn't make you them." "No," she said, "but it means the company I built, the woman I became, was born out of a lie." He leaned forward. "No, Alexis. She was born out of the decision to do better. The difference between you and your father is that when you saw the system was broken, you rebuilt it. He buried it. You brought it into the light." Her throat tightened. "What if the light shows I'm just as dark underneath?" Michael reached across the table and took her hand. "It won't." And something in her, coiled tight for too long, unclenched. She didn't move away. But before the moment could settle, her phone buzzed on the counter. She ignored it. It buzzed again. Michael gave her a look. "Go ahead. Could be the kids." She stood reluctantly, walked over, and read the screen. "Unknown number. I didn't know about your father, I swear, but I think you need to see something else. It's about the early patents. Check your inbox." The message was unsigned. No context, just dread. She opened her email and clicked on the new attachment. Her heart sank. It was a scanned document from Monroe Biolabs dated 10 years ago, when she and Jacob were still newly married, still building dreams with whiteboards and grant proposals. It was a provisional patent application, filed under Jacob's name, but it wasn't his formula. It was hers. Alexis felt the air leave her lungs. She scrolled down and saw her own notes, her handwriting, her equations, copied verbatim. Only the name had changed. She staggered slightly, one hand bracing against the counter. Michael was there in seconds. "What is it?" She turned the screen toward him. "He filed my first patent under his name," she whispered, "before the company launched. Before we ever had lawyers involved. He said it was just to hold our place in the system, that we'd fix it later." Michael scanned the page. But he never did. She nodded numbly. "All this time, I thought the betrayal started with Julian and Lena. I thought Jacob had been weak, but not dishonest." Her voice broke. "But this was the first lie. And I didn't even see it." Michael's expression darkened. "You're sure he knew?" "He had to know." She sat down hard, the room spinning slightly. Michael crouched beside her. "You don't have to decide what to do tonight. But whatever you choose, I'm here. Whether that means war or walking away." She nodded, but her mind was already somewhere else. Not at the press conference, not at the merger, but 6 years ago, in a different kitchen, with a man who once looked her in the eyes and told her he believed in her more than anyone. And now she wondered if he ever had. The knock on Jacob's door came after midnight. He was still in the same chair he'd sunk into hours earlier, his apartment dim except for the soft glow from the kitchen. The twins' drawings, stick figures of Harper holding a CEO badge and Harrison with a beaker twice his size, were taped to his fridge. It was the only color in the place. When he opened the door and saw Alexis standing there, coat still buttoned, hair pulled back like a woman holding herself together by sheer will, he knew. Something had shifted. "Can I come in?" she asked. He stepped aside. She walked past him to the window, where the skyline shimmered, sharp and distant. "I got a message tonight," she said, not turning around. Anonymous, but verified. An internal memo from Monroe Biolabs, dated 2015. Jacob frowned. "What kind of memo?" She faced him. "My patent," she said softly. "The one I drafted on the floor of our apartment. The one I gave to you to review before we submitted it together. You filed it under your name." He blinked. "Alexis." "It had my handwriting on the notes," she said, voice rising. "My formula, my signature. You submitted it without me." He stepped forward, hands up, but stopped when he saw her flinch, just barely. "I didn't mean to steal it," he said, and even to his own ears the words felt thin. "It was chaotic. I was trying to fast-track our application before the window closed. I thought I'd fix the paperwork later." "But you didn't." "I forgot," he said. "And once the company took off, I didn't even think about—" "You forgot?" she snapped. "You forgot the thing I spent 2 years building? The formula that launched the entire company?" Jacob's face crumpled. "I was young, and we were moving fast, and I thought, God, I thought we were a team. That everything we built was ours." Her silence cut sharper than her voice. "I didn't mean to erase you," he whispered. "But you did," she said, "and not just once." He looked at her. really looked. Is that what you've always thought? That I used you, then threw you away? Didn't you? Her voice cracked on the last word. When Julian told you I'd cheated, when you saw forged messages and never asked me to explain, didn't you already believe I was disposable? I didn't believe it, he said quietly. I was afraid it was true, that I had married someone brilliant enough to see I didn't belong beside her. Alexis stared at him. There it was, the rot at the root. It wasn't your company, Jacob, she said. It was ours. But you needed to be the genius, the heir, the man with the answers. And when I started shining too brightly, you dimmed me. He didn't deny it. He couldn't. I let Julian get in my head, he said. I let my pride drown my instincts. And then I let you go. Because believing you betrayed me was easier than admitting I failed you first. A long silence stretched between them. Alexis wrapped her arms around herself. I don't hate you, she said, eyes wet. I just don't recognize you anymore, and I don't know if I ever truly did. Jacob felt something inside him fold. I want to know them, he said. Our children. I want to be there. You can be, she replied. But this ended long before I walked out that night. He nodded, pain etched deep in his features. I thought if I could fix the company, if I could help you rebuild it, maybe. You can't rebuild what never had a foundation, she said. And the part of me that loved you. She died in a hotel bathroom holding a pregnancy test and a coat too thin for November. Jacob closed his eyes. I'm sorry. I know, she whispered. She stepped past him, toward the door. He turned, desperate. Is there someone else? She stopped. There it was, the question he hadn't let himself ask until now. Alexis looked at him, steady, clear. There's someone who knows how to stand beside me without needing to dim the light. Someone who listens without competing. Who's never made me choose between love and dignity. Jacob's mouth opened, but no words came. I hope, she added, you find someone like that too. Then she walked out, and for the first time, he let her go without chasing. Because maybe real love, if it ever truly existed between them, meant knowing when to stop holding on. The city glowed beneath a low spring fog, softening even the sharpest skyscrapers into watercolor shadows. Alexis stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of Valiant's new midtown office, the final press release spread across her glass desk. The words were hers. Every line had been reviewed, edited, lived. But today she wasn't reading it as a CEO. She was reading it as a woman choosing what kind of future she wanted. A soft knock came at the door. Come in, she said, already knowing who it was. Michael stepped in, holding a cup of her favorite chai from the little bodega they used to sneak out to during late clinic nights, when her startup had only 3 employees and a dream. He was in scrubs, hair damp from rain, smile quiet but warm. I was nearby, he said, wanted to see how you were holding up. She accepted the drink, fingers brushing his. Tired, but clear. Big day? The biggest, she said, gesturing to the release. We go public with the merger this afternoon. I step in as sole executive of the new Valiant Monroe Group, and I close the door on 6 years of ghosts. Michael studied her face. You sure you're ready to lock that door? I already did, she said. Last night. He nodded, eyes searching hers. And are you okay with what's behind the next one? It wasn't just a question about business. It never had been. Alexis set her cup down and walked to the center of the room, suddenly aware of how different the view looked today. She wasn't on a high floor looking down on what she built. She was right where she was supposed to be, in it. I used to think love and success had to be either or, she said, that I had to protect my ambition from my heart. Michael didn't interrupt. I gave Jacob everything I had, she continued, voice steady, and he made me smaller to keep himself centered. I didn't realize how much of me I'd shrunk to fit the life he wanted. Michael took a slow step toward her. But you're not small anymore. No, she said, a small smile breaking through. And I won't ever be again. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a tiny velvet pouch. She arched a brow. If there's a ring in there, I'm walking out. He laughed. Relax, I'm not suicidal. He opened the pouch and took out a key. To my place, he said. Not a proposal, not a plea, just an invitation. Alexis took it slowly, the cool weight of it in her palm grounding her. I don't need saving, Michael. I know, he said. But maybe you deserve someone who never asked you to be less than everything you are. Her throat tightened. Don't make promises you can't keep. I won't, he said. But I will keep showing up. She looked up at him, at the quiet steadiness in his eyes. The kind of man who stayed through storms without needing to be thanked for the umbrella. Maybe love wasn't about grand gestures or dramatic declarations. Maybe it was about choosing the person who showed up when the cameras weren't rolling, when the world wasn't watching. She took his hand. I'm not ready to unlock anything yet, she said. But you can wait with me, if you want. His smile was soft, unshaken. That's all I've ever wanted. They stood there a moment longer, surrounded by the hum of the city, by everything that had been lost and found. Then Alexis turned back to her desk, picked up the release, and signed it. Below her name in bold type, Chief Executive Officer, Valiant Monroe Innovations, Alexis Carter. Monroe, her past, her present, her future, all on her terms. 1 year later, the Monroe estate looked nothing like it had on that infamous wedding day. Gone were the pretentious white roses, the marble statues, the illusion of perfection curated for the cameras. Now the grounds buzzed with kids chasing bubbles, balloons swaying gently from tree branches, and a food truck parked under an oak tree serving build-your-own sundaes. It was Harper and Harrison's 7th birthday, their first real party with everyone in their lives present. Alexis stood near the garden steps, watching as Harper gave instructions to the magician like a tiny executive. Harrison, meanwhile, showed off a working paper volcano to a circle of awestruck classmates. Jacob stood by the lemonade stand, sleeves rolled up, helping a group of kids pour without flooding the table. He caught Alexis's eye and gave a small wave. She returned it without hesitation. It had taken time, months of slow, awkward visits, therapy sessions, and hard conversations. Jacob had never asked for a second chance at her heart. He'd earned his way back into their lives by becoming exactly what the twins needed, consistent, present, willing to listen. And Alexis had let him. Not because she needed him, because they did. Thought I'd find you lurking in management mode, Bea said, appearing at her side with 2 cups of sparkling lemonade. Alexis grinned and accepted one. Old habits die hard. Bea followed her gaze. He's trying, you can tell. He is, Alexis said. And he doesn't make it about himself anymore. Bea raised a brow. That's growth. Miracles do happen. They laughed together, the kind of laugh that only comes after surviving the impossible and choosing to live well in spite of it. A moment later, Alexis felt a hand brush gently against hers. She didn't need to look. She knew the feel of it now. Michael. He was dressed simply, tan slacks, a crisp blue shirt, and had just come from the hospital. Still, he made time. He always did. Volcano's a hit, he said. Your son may have a future in pyrotechnics. He's your fault, she said, bumping his shoulder. He leaned in a little, voice lower. You okay? She nodded. I am. I really, really am. Michael didn't say anything more. He didn't need to. And yet, for all the people gathered in joy, all the rebuilt bridges, Alexis couldn't help but feel the tiniest ache when she glanced at the big oak tree at the edge of the lawn. It had been her thinking spot back when she and Jacob lived here, before the betrayals, before the twins, before she had to become a woman made of fire and granite. Now she was something else. Still strong, but not so hard. Still brilliant, but not always armored. And maybe, just maybe, finally, open to happiness without having to guard it. She slipped away from the crowd for a moment and walked toward the tree. The breeze picked up around her, lifting her curls, making the linen of her dress ripple softly. Jacob joined her a minute later, keeping a respectful distance. "They're happy," he said. "They are." He watched her carefully. "Thank you for letting me be a father, even when I didn't deserve it." "You became one," she replied. "That matters more than whether you earned it before." He glanced toward the house. "I sold the rest of the property last month. Just kept this acre. For the kids. Figured they'd want to come back here someday and remember the good parts." "That's generous," she said. He smiled faintly. "It's the least I could do." They stood in silence for a beat. Then he said, "You love him, don't you?" Alexis turned. "Michael." He nodded. "I do." "No part of me is surprised," Jacob said. "You needed someone who saw you clearly, and loved you because of it, not in spite of it." Alexis looked up at him, softer than she'd been in years. "You were never my mistake, Jacob. Just the chapter that taught me who I am." His throat worked. "I'll always be grateful you let me be part of the story again." Just then, Harper shouted from the bounce house, "Mom! We're about to do the cake!" Alexis smiled and waved back. "Coming." She turned to Jacob. "You coming?" "In a minute." She headed back toward the party, toward Michael, toward the life she had rewritten with her own hands. And when the candles were lit, and the children leaned over to make their wishes, Alexis didn't close her eyes to make one of her own. She didn't need to, because everything she could have wished for was already here. 3 months later, the penthouse was quiet. Not silent, never truly silent with twins around, but filled with a kind of peaceful hum Alexis had once believed only existed in other people's lives. She could hear Harper humming from the study, narrating her science project into a toy microphone. Harrison sat cross-legged in the living room with Michael, helping him assemble a new telescope. Only for real stars, Harrison had clarified. Not fake ones like Instagram people. Alexis stood in the kitchen, barefoot in jeans, slicing apples for lunch, the kind of mundane thing that once would have felt foreign. Now it was a rhythm she didn't realize she craved. This was the life she'd built after the fire. Not a castle in the sky, not a throne surrounded by yes-men, but a home. One with late-night laughter and Sunday morning pancakes. One with love, not power, at its center. She poured juice into glasses and took a moment to look out at the city. The skyline still dazzled, still roared with ambition and legacy, but she didn't need to conquer it anymore. She'd already won the only thing that mattered, herself. Behind her, Michael entered quietly and wrapped his arms around her waist. "They're arguing about whether Pluto counts as a planet again," he said into her ear. "I'm staying out of it." She laughed, leaning into him. "Smart man." "I try." They stood that way for a long moment, just breathing. "Everything's ready for the gala tonight," he said. "You sure you want to make this your final appearance as Valiant's CEO?" She nodded. "It's time. I'll still be chair. But the day-to-day? It's someone else's turn. Someone with the energy for 17-hour days and investor wrangling." "And you?" he asked. She turned in his arms. "I want to build something smaller, quieter. Maybe a foundation that supports female founders. Maybe a school. Or maybe just more time with our kids." He smiled. I liked the sound of that. The gala that evening was elegant but understated, exactly how Alexis had planned it. No gaudy displays, no over-the-top speeches, just a beautiful rooftop filled with the people who'd walked alongside her, believed in her, fought beside her when everything was dark. As she stood at the podium for the final time, the city lights behind her, she paused to absorb the moment. She wasn't just the woman who'd returned with a secret and a fire to set the world straight. She was the woman who had grown into grace. 6 years ago, she began, I stood in a parking lot with no money, no job, and a pair of tiny heartbeats inside me. I had every reason to be bitter. But what I held on to was something stronger. The belief that what we build in the dark can shine even brighter in the light. She looked out at the crowd, Jacob standing near the back, flanked by Harper and Harrison, both beaming. He met her eyes and nodded. No bitterness, no regret, just respect. She continued, Tonight, I step down from my role as CEO. Not because I'm done building, but because I've learned that the most important legacies aren't made in boardrooms. They're made at bedtime, at dinner tables, on school pickup runs and late-night science fairs. And if I've built anything worth remembering, I hope it's this, that a woman can lose everything and still choose to rise with her heart intact. The applause was soft at first, then steady, then thunderous. Later, on the rooftop terrace, she stood alone for a moment, letting the wind lift her hair, letting the city see her, not as a symbol, but as a woman fully, finally, at peace. Michael found her there, a glass of wine in each hand. To freedom, he said, handing her one. To choosing it every single day, she replied. They clinked glasses and sipped. He set his down and reached into his jacket pocket, not for a ring, not for anything official, but for a folded piece of paper. She frowned as she opened it. Inside, a sketch, done in pencil. A school, a laboratory, a house with a porch and bikes outside. The kids helped me draw it, he said. Harrison added solar panels. Harper insisted on a wine fridge. Alexis laughed, eyes wet now. You said you wanted to build something quieter, he said. Thought maybe this could be the blueprint. She looked up at him, every wall she'd ever built softened by this man who had never once asked her to be anyone but herself. Let's build it, she whispered. And when he kissed her, it wasn't the fireworks kind of kiss. It was the kind that made you feel safe, seen, home. As the wind curled around them and the city twinkled below, Alexis knew this was not the ending. It was the life that came after, and she had chosen every part of it.